So good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our PFLAG panel discussion. And before we do get started, I do want to let everybody know that we will be recording tonight's session. This is our grandparents panel discussion featuring AARP New Hampshire and PFLAG New Hampshire. My name is Mary Roberge, and I am an AARP New Hampshire volunteer. Our guest speakers this evening are Erica Allen, Abby Maxwell, and Donna. And working with me today is AARP staff, Ashley Davis, and also AARP New Hampshire volunteers, Marsha and Linda. Ashley will be helping to moderate with me, and Marsha and Linda will be monitoring the question and answer section and also the chat and raising your questions and your comments throughout this program. I do want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. We do want to hear from you this evening. So if you would like to ask a question or a comment, please use the question and answer section, which can be accessed at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the Q&A section.
At AARP New Hampshire, we are focused on the health, financial security, and social connection critical to the well-being of the 50+ in the Granite State. We are committed to the LGBTQ+ community, and we believe in its core belief in dignity, worth, and potential of every individual. AARP rejects discrimination based on a person's age, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity. We see diversity not as a reason for division, but as a source of strength. For AARP, LGBTQ+ communities are a vital part of the quilt of American life.
So this evening, we will have a panel ready to tackle some sensitive topics and answer questions with hopes of increasing our community's comfort and understanding of the LGBTQ+ people in our lives. We would like to first introduce the panel members before handing the stage over to Erica. Erica Allen's involvement with PFLAG New Hampshire started in March of 2018 when she began attending the monthly support sessions in Concord. She joined the PFLAG New Hampshire State Board in October of 2018, and she currently serves as the organization's president. She travels throughout New Hampshire sharing the organization's, sharing PFLAG's message and her personal story of life as a trans woman. She serves on the Judicial Branch Steering Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. In addition, she works as an information technology manager for the state of New Hampshire. And to this day, she continues to be passionate about food and entertaining. She also loves baseball, yoga, foosball, pool, and darts. She and her wife love to travel, and they have 2 children and a grandchild.
Wonderful. Tonight we also have Abby Maxwell with us. Abby goes by she, her, and she is a writer from New Hampshire. She has published 2 novels, Lake People and The Den, and her memoir, One Day I'll Grow Up, I'll Be a Beautiful Woman, is forthcoming in 2023. The memoir explores gender, class, and motherhood in rural New Hampshire and what happened when her transgender daughter socially transitioned, pitting a small community against itself and her family. In addition to writing, she works part-time as a librarian and volunteers for multiple organizations, including working for LGBTQ+ rights in New Hampshire.
And Donna, she, her, has been a member of PFLAG New Hampshire since 2018 and currently serves on the board as the membership coordinator. Donna became involved with PFLAG after attending her first support group meeting back in 2016, where others graciously shared their stories and their experiences. Donna enjoys being a part of the New Hampshire Community Pride events. Her mission is to remain steadfast in supporting the LGBTQ+ community. When not involved in PFLAG, she enjoys gardening, golf, theater, yoga, sports, travel, and family time. Her hope is that we can all live today, we can all live without fear of being who we are or how we identify. So welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. For the first section of our discussion today, Erica Allen is going to lead us with an introduction to the language of the LGBTQ+ community. Erica?
You got through that very quickly. I'm up already. So welcome, everyone. I thought actually I'd start first with a little piece that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago for Transgender Day of Remembrance. I think I'd have an easier time saying that. And this is really a piece that I wrote to remember those in the trans community who lost their lives to hate. And so here we go. We who are able. Some find us perplexing. Others think we are vexing. Some find us ugly, perverse, decadent. Others think we are shocking, absurd, irrelevant. Some say we are scandalous. Others claim we are dangerous. Some say we corrupt gender, masculinity, the American way. Others claim we threaten culture, feminism, God's way. Some say we violate churches, workplaces, classrooms. Others claim we invade dorm rooms, locker rooms, bathrooms. We are children, spouses, and parents. We're siblings, cousins, grandparents. We're doctors, teachers, students, electricians. We're clergy, soldiers, plumbers, politicians. We're athletes, artists, writers, bandmates. We're colleagues, partners, lovers, soulmates. We are all ages, all cultures, all people. We are all creeds, all colors, all equal. We cry, we play, we feel, we work. We sing, we pray, we love, we hurt. We share with all minorities fear of our difference. We share with all minorities suffering from ignorance. Sometimes we bend. Sometimes we hurt. We dare to lay claim to be who we are. We have waited so long to come this far. Here on the common, we honor the fallen. So many lives lost to violence and fate. A rainbow of souls extinguished by hate. How many others died unremembered? How many more will die? For those who were shunned and disrespected, for those who were beaten and sorely neglected, we who are able must be ourselves now. We who are able must show others how. We who are able must beat ignorance. We who are able must fight intolerance. We who are able must destroy vile hate. We who are able can no longer wait. We who are able must dispel the fear. We who are able must claim our place here. So thought I'd do that just to kind of set the tone. And I thought I also would share a little bit about PFLAG. So for those of you not familiar with PFLAG, or even those of you who are familiar with PFLAG but don't know much about it, PFLAG was born out of love. The love of a woman, Jean Manford, who back in the early 70s, 1972 actually, was mortified when her gay son Morty was beaten by the police for distributing flyers in New York City in support of the gay and lesbian community. So she responded, became very active, and her passion and activism resulted in the founding in 1973 of what is now the largest organization in the country for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, their parents, families, and allies. There are over 400 chapters throughout the United States. We have over 200,000 members. And I can say this about PFLAG. It is committed to creating a world that embodies what Ashley just shared earlier, a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed. In New Hampshire, you can find us in Concord, Nashua, and up the Seacoast, where we have our support sessions. Right now, we are online. We're working to get back in person. It's tough with COVID. So a little bit about what we believe in. Our PFLAG envisions a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Our core values are meeting people where they are and collaborating with others. We seek to realize our vision through support for families, allies, and people who are LGBTQ+. There's a lot of letters there. Ran out, one plus. We also do it through education for ourselves and others about the unique issues and challenges that LGBTQ people face, and through advocacy in our communities to change attitudes and create policies and laws that achieve full equality for people that are LGBTQ. So that gives you a sense of PFLAG and our history, and there you go. After that, I'm going to go over some terms. Now, I had thought about doing it in sort of a question way. I don't know if we can do that with you facilitating on the chat and letting me know. What I'm looking for is I'm going to throw out a couple terms, and I was going to ask the audience, any members of the audience who would like to respond, to give an answer. I've never done it this way before. Let's just give it a try and see how it works.
Okay, we'll watch.
So my first term, I wonder if anybody can tell me what binary means. Give people a few seconds to enter in. And we have no prizes to give, unfortunately, but the satisfaction of getting it right or giving us an answer. Let me know if you can see the chat.
Yeah, I'm watching the chat now.
You're getting responsive.
We had someone comment that your poem was beautiful,
Oh, that's not what I
but
was
as far as answering the question, I think that we might have some newbies here, or a quiet group.
And this is fine, because part of the point of me asking these questions is we, in the course of talking tonight, we may refer to these terms, and I just kind of want to make sure that people are familiar with them. So unless any of you can see like little dots with people chatting, I'm going to just.
There's a couple people. Kim has said that it relates to gender, and Christina has said that binary means there are two options.
Yeah, that's right. So binary is a bit of a black and white perspective on gender identity, which is that you see on one side of that spectrum, male, a man, and on the other is a woman. And the reality is that gender actually is on a continuous spectrum. So to be binary is to be at either end of that spectrum, male or female, which will lead me into not the next term I have here, but the associated term, which is non-binary. And I'll just elaborate on that and say that non-binary is essentially everybody in between. People who don't identify completely as male or female. They may have a little bit of both. They may be a little bit more manly, a little bit more feminine, or they may be right in the middle where they don't even identify as male or female. And for some people, that's a relatively new concept, but it's an important one to understand if we do talk about it. So those two are, I think, any questions on that? If there are, I'll just pull them up in the chat, let me know. Another term that I think we've been hearing a lot about over the years is cisgender, or for short, cis. Now, if you've ever heard that, and I know a lot of people have heard that, and they're like, what is cis? What is this? What does it mean? Turns out most of the people actually asking that question are themselves cis, because 95+% of the population is cis. Cis simply means that the gender identity that you feel, how you feel as a person, whether you're male, female, or in between, if you're cis, you align with the binary. Your physical body and how you feel about it aligns with what you were assigned at birth. So if you were born as a boy, you feel like a boy, you're cisgender. Same with girls. Born as a girl, feel like a girl, you're cisgender. And the counterpart to that, as an umbrella term, is transgender, which again, everybody in between. And transgender includes people who are non-binary, gender fluid, anybody who doesn't fit that spectrum of being male or female. I am transgender. I believe the ladies to my left, Abby and Donna, we don't discuss this normally, really they're cisgender. So if you ever hear cisgender, it's identifies people who identify in their mind, in their feelings about themselves with the body they were assigned at birth. Here's a question I have for you that really is important, especially for the trans community. It's gender dysphoria. And I'm curious to know if anybody's familiar with that term and would like to take a stab at sharing their understanding of it, because it's very important to understand it. So I'll give a few minutes on that. And I'm going to actually throw out a couple of them so you can line them up if you want. Another one is gender expression. That's actually fairly easy. All you have to do is think about it. But don't be afraid if you don't know it. There's a lot of new terms in the trans community. One I think I've already used, so it's good to make sure we understand it, is gender identity. So if somebody wants to take a shot at that, go for it. I covered non-binary, and I'll briefly cover transgender because I think most people know what that is. I've kind of talked about it already. It's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation. Those two are frequently conflated. To identify as male or female, and whether you're graced with a body that aligns with that, has nothing to do with your attraction to people's own gender. You could be trans and be heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you can be cis, and we all know cis people can be heterosexual, bisexual, and so on and so forth. So just because people are trans has nothing to do with their orientation on sex. So I think I'll flip back. Did you get any responses?
Yes. So I think it's interesting, and it's great that you're bringing things up. We have a couple people who have said that a lot of these terms are confusing, and agreed with you there. And someone else had commented that, going back to your discussion on non-binary, that they have a hard time with the pronouns that align that way as well. So there's some comments there. And then we did have some understanding of gender dysphoria being feelings of distress about gender identity not aligning with biological sex.
That's actually a really, really good answer. Kudos on that answer. I would say that the distress can rise to the level of being debilitating and mentally unhealthy. People who struggle with gender dysphoria and are not able to move forward in a constructive, healthy way. In other words, start to take ownership of their identity and have the confidence and the support to start to embrace their identity, struggle terribly in society, at work, with family, with friends, and it can lead to serious mental health consequences. So it's a very, very serious disorder. It's actually a diagnosis in the medical community, and something to, if any of you are exposed or have family that are addressing or issues relating to being trans, be aware that they may well be contending with very serious health struggles, mental health struggles with the dysphoria and with not being able to feel safe and confident to actually embrace their identity. They feel repressed, they feel unsafe, they have tremendous fear depending upon their situation. And then I think, what was the other one we answered? Non-binary? Was that? No, that wasn't it. There was one other, wasn't there?
I think you mentioned a few. You had also mentioned trans, but there was one before it as well.
What was the one? I mean, I'm just thinking about the responses. There were some responses I just wanted to follow up on.
Those were the responses that we received. So we followed up on those. The other responses were, there were some people confused. And then someone else was having a hard time with the pronouns that aligned with the binary or versus non-binary.
Can you guys provide any kind of guidance from your perspective on pronouns? I mean, we all have to kind of deal with it. But
Yeah, I think I'm guessing they're referring to the use of they, them
Mhm.
pronouns. And I think it can be hard to get used to, and it can save somebody's life. And it's just a matter of respecting someone, and you'll probably make a mistake. And if you do, you just correct it and keep moving forward. Yeah. And it doesn't take that long to get used to. It felt strange to me at first when I first got to know people, or when I first met somebody with those pronouns. Exposure is how we get rid of bias. I think it's like the number one way we get rid of it. And so just taking in LGBTQ media, books or movies that have people in them with they, them pronouns, or going to PFLAG meetings, that sort of thing. You get used to it.
I mean, one of the things that Abby said that it is really, really important. I can guess that many people who struggle with pronouns also struggle with, feeling bad about messing up. And I would say, keep in mind that your intention behind what you're doing really matters. So if you mean well, if you are in every other aspect showing love and support for a trans loved one, and you make a mistake in the pronoun, you can't really account for their reaction. It may be difficult for them, and that's understandable. But don't beat yourself up. I'm just point of fact. A couple of years ago, we had new neighbors move in. And my wife sent me down there with a housewarming gift. It wasn't a pronoun, but it's the same thing. I went up to the house, knocked on the door, and they answered. I said, "Hi, my name is Eric." Oh. And I forgave myself, of course, but it's like we make the mistakes ourselves. It happens from time to time. It's fairly rare for me, but when you make a change like that, even the person who's making the change has to make adjustments because you are inculcated with your identity as you grow up. You're conditioned a certain way, and getting over that conditioning is tricky. So the important thing that Abby said is to acknowledge it and move on and move forward, and don't beat yourself up.
That's wonderful. We got a response in the chat about, could you explain? And this person might mean like the orientation of she, her versus they, them, and what that person might be feeling.
What was the first part of that?
Well, I'm trying to paraphrase. Their question was if you could explain she, her, they, them as the pronouns. If someone's using different pronouns, how they're, what they should, not what they should be using, but
Well, my understanding would be that she, her, that person identifies as a female. They, them, they may identify as both, male or female. They don't use, when you approach someone that uses those pronouns, you don't want to use she or him, so they go by they, them. That would be my understanding.
Kind of.
There are several pronouns. There are more than, I can't even count them on my hands, but as the membership coordinator, we, ask people when they sign up what their pronouns are so that we can kind of have an idea if they, join a support group meeting or whatever. And there are several. There's not just he, him, she, her, they, them. There are several. And we can put those on our website if you have questions about others. I think there's one that's XI, which I don't even know what it is, but that's how they identify.
I've heard another one, it was very difficult for me to do it because there's only one person I know that was using it. And it was, instead of they, them, it was AEYMEM. And it was a new one on me. I'm still not exactly sure what it means. So another good point is do the best you can, educate yourself. But as Donna pointed out, there are so many things, so many different variations on how people identify. And the only thing I was going to add is they, them, you can typically associate it with somebody who's non-binary or gender fluid. They're not male, they're not female, so they reject pronoun that identifies them as such.
thank you.
That was really all that I had for terms. I don't know if anybody else has any questions about terms that they themselves that we didn't answer, but I would recommend, if you want to hear more about terms, if we're able to answer, we'd be happy to.
Great. I think that's a good reminder. If you do have any questions, you can stick them in the Q&A section and we'll be pulling them up later for our panelists to answer. Thank you for sharing all that wisdom with us, Erica. We're now going to move in to the frequently asked questions section of our presentation. And then after that, we'll be opening up the room to the audience and taking all your questions from the Q&A section.
So many grandparents are currently in situations where a family member has expressed being part of the LGBTQ+ community in some way. A common first thought is, aren't they too young? Or is this a phase they will grow out of? We would love to hear your thoughts.
I can start. I think that is such a common question. It's a question that my husband and I asked ourselves when we were dealing with our daughter who was assigned male at birth. And she began to tell us in a variety of ways when she was 3 or 4 that she was a girl. And we thought, she's too young. I thought often of a stage in my own life when I was like 5 and wanted to be a boy so badly. And I asked people to call me Leroy, who was my favorite character from the TV show Fame. But there were some significant differences between what my daughter was experiencing and my fun little wanting to be a boy. And one of them is that I never experienced any distress being a girl. And my daughter started to express a lot of distress that only increased over the years. She would say that she hated herself for having to live as a boy. She would hit herself in the head, bang her head on the wall, just so much dysphoria, as Erica defined. And it just got stronger and stronger. And then when she was 6, she started to tell people at school that she was a girl, and that she needed a new name. So I think there were a few moments for me during that time period that really broke open my understanding of what we were dealing with, and that it wasn't about her age. And one was when she had a dance recital coming up, and she was saying that she wasn't going to do it. She wasn't going to go on the stage because it was so embarrassing to go out there in a boy's costume. And I said, wait a minute, it would be less embarrassing for you to have the girl's costume. This was before she socially transitioned, which means to change her name and her pronoun. And she said, well, duh, that's the costume I'm supposed to have. And I think that was when I started to understand that she wasn't saying, I wish I were a girl. She was saying, I am a girl and I need you to let me live as I am. So yeah, I think it makes sense to be like, oh, is this person too young, or is this a phase? But I think you start to know. And I also think that we all know our genders. Nobody, or most of us do. Nobody questioned my understanding when I was young that I was a girl. I know being transgender is unfamiliar to a lot of us, but it obviously exists, and it's a natural part of the fabric of humanity. So yeah, that's what I think.
I too have, I am a grandmother of a transgender grandchild. And like Abby said, it started when he was 3 years old, coming from a birthday party, sitting in the car seat, and all of a sudden starting to cry. And his mom looked back and said, what's wrong? And he said, I want to be a girl. And we kind of just dismissed it. He had just come from a party. He may have been playing with the girls a lot more than the boys. I don't remember if it was a girls' party or whatever, but anyhow, it was back that young. And we dismissed it a little till further down the road. He went to school, of course, dressed in boys' clothes. And what really hit us was when he would come home, the first thing that he would do was to go put on some new clothes, some girl clothes. So anyhow, we found out later on that it really isn't a phase. In her case, I will call it her now. But we supported and loved her just as she was, and she's very happy and thriving. And yeah, so it's just, love your child, love your grandchild, no matter. I know there are people, I'm sure, that, child wants to go to the store and it's, a male and wants a doll. Well, buy them the doll, so you just love your child and your grandchildren.
I think one of the key takeaways when I think about this, and I think about my own childhood, real important message from both of them is to love that child unconditionally, regardless, and to try to contain that expression is incredibly dangerous. It's really the much healthier and safer path to allow that child the room and the space to grow in every way, including exploring their identity. If it is a phase, let them work through the phase. They'll work through it. But if you try to contain it, either way, it's a bad choice because you're repressing just natural youthful exploration, or far worse. It's just the statistics bear this out. If people, families try to contain the child's identity expression in a way that just aligns with their sex assigned, their identity assigned at birth, the mental health outcomes are atrocious, and the rates of suicide in the trans community among youth is the highest of any other category, in fact. The ideation rate, in other words, the idea that they want to commit suicide in this category is over 40%. Almost half the children who are contending with this struggle are thinking about killing themselves. It's no laughing matter. I don't think anybody thinks it's a laughing matter, but it's a very serious matter. And I can say that very briefly that when I was young, which is a long time ago, I am an AARP member, and easily qualified almost a decade ago. So when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, there was nobody like me. And my parents did try to contain it. And they tried to contain it not because they wouldn't have supported it, because I'm sure if they were alive, if they had children 50 years later, they would have been very different in how they behaved. But they were afraid for me. They were afraid that if I went, they actually thought I was, they didn't even know what trans was. The term didn't exist back then. They thought I was gay or something just, not a boy. And they were correcting me all the time. And since there were no other role models, I didn't know anybody like me, there was nobody in media, nothing like that. I just thought there was something wrong with me. And I just figured, my parents care for me. They love me. When they tell me not to touch a hot stove, get it. They tell me not to put on my mom's clothes. Why not? I should listen to my parents. They know best. And that caused a lot of struggle for me for a long time. A lot of, I'm not going to go into detail, but God, I would give anything to have to be a child today. Gosh, maybe 50 years from now, we won't even need these conversations. So it's a very, very serious issue, and it's an important question.
I just want to tie to the statistic that you said, that it's without appropriate support. So
Thank you.
once people are supported, those numbers
Go way down.
plummet.
Thank you for the clarification.
So, yeah. Thank you.
I'm learning so much myself tonight too.
I am too.
So we know that family members or friends, anyone close to someone who might be going through what you guys have been describing, they might have thoughts about whether someone is, part of the LGBTQ plus community before that person has chosen to discuss it with others. Speaking from your knowledge or experience, should allies bring up that subject first? And in those conversations, what should we do if we're saying the wrong thing?
My thought, and what we have done is we let our child lead, or my grandchild lead the conversation. We didn't ask how they felt. We just observed, and we went with that. We supported, what they were doing or what she was doing. And we didn't judge. We didn't speak negatively about others in the community, the LGBTQ community. Of course, we had an idea on what was going on, but I would just let them lead, let them decide when they're ready to say something. But be there for them. Let them know that you're there, that you are a person they can talk to, and that will make them feel safe and open up more.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I think it's a good practice to ask, or at least offer your own pronouns if you're meeting somebody, so you can open up that space. But in terms of family, yeah, I think we've always done the same, let our daughter kind of lead the way. But as we've learned about LGBTQ people and culture, we've also been very purposeful in letting our child know that it's open. So, you know, saying things like, one day when you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a non-binary partner, just kind of leaving those things open so we know she will feel safe when the time comes. But yeah, and in terms of like getting things wrong, I think, yeah, I think just kind of trying to lead with love and kindness, and also there's so much information out there, and so there's educating yourself is really powerful too.
I think another strong point too, as far as what Abby just said, is just apologize and move on. Don't make it about you. You know, I'm an old, you know, I'm a grandmother, so how am I supposed to know all this? That's not the right thing to say. Just apologize, move on, observe again, and listen to your child or grandchild or any family member that you might have, or anyone in the community, of course.
Two of the significant points that I heard and that resonated strongly with me from Abby and Donna really boil down to ensuring that that child has autonomy over this experience of like coping with something that's actually very hard and generates a lot of fear. They need to feel in control. The moment somebody starts to co-opt their autonomy and try to make decisions for them, or rush things, or assume things, it's a trigger. It's a guaranteed trigger. Speak from experience. People, that child needs to feel that they can control things and feel safe. And the other side of that, they both spoke to, is what you can do is create a safe space. And by safe space, there are visible things you can do. And if you don't want to be over the top about it, because it can kind of be like a little bit obvious, but you can have displays of the little things, a little pride flag or a pride button, or talk about if you happen to enjoy certain art or movies or things like that, fold in, but don't make it exclusive because that becomes patently obvious. Fold in references to other shows or things that you've experienced that also acknowledge people who are LGBTQ. When doctors and nurses and schools and counselors ask about, should I put literature out on my table to let people know? I said, yeah, but don't just make it the only piece of literature. Make sure it's part of a community of literature that represents the whole of society. And that's really an important thing to recognize. This is not something that you just look at it from a linear perspective. It's part of the whole community. And we just need, or those of us who are not in that community, need to become acquainted and educated about the community. I was thinking and there is a very specific case though I thought of, and I just had a coworker of mine ask me this. He's a scoutmaster. And one of the kids in the scouts, at the end of their period of being a scout, they turned 18, they transitioned and went to college. They came back to be involved with the scouts, and they had transitioned, but they weren't out to everybody in the community. And he was in this no man's land where, depending on who he talked to and who was present, he knows the father would refer to the child as a female, but then some people would show up in the scouting organization and he would suddenly switch to male. And he was like, how do I do that? I mean, that's not easy. That's a real challenge. I said, well, you've got two considerations. respecting the child's identity and preserving their privacy. And privacy comes first. So you need to go talk to them and let them know that you want to respect their identity, that you want to preserve their privacy, and ask them for guidance. So sometimes you get in that position where it's like there's no easy answer. And so you do have to get educated. Sometimes that is a conversation. And those conversations may not be easy, but I will say privacy first. You know, you may want to honor somebody's identity because they are so, but you have to really pay attention to where their boundaries are with privacy. Coming out is a complicated process.
We did have a question in the chat actually related to that. There was someone asking, you know, what should we do if this person is not opening up, even if the, you know, their loved ones are supportive?
I think what I was talking about there actually is very closely related to that, which is, I don't know if the questioner can, if there's more detail, but going on the question, I would just say that the first thing is, if that child is opening up, as I said, coming out is complicated, pay attention and always strive to preserve privacy foremost, so that if they're not out to their friends, but they're out to their family, you've got to protect that. That's tricky, but it's anybody who's worked in government with sensitive information and confidential information has to play that game too. So it's not just, this is a thing that people should be able to do, which is to distinguish between sensitive information that is privileged to family and not privileged to others. And sometimes if you are in that privileged environment, then you sort of have access to ask that question. Who are we okay sharing this with? We want to preserve your privacy while respecting your identity. And that's why it's all so important to respect the autonomy of the child.
I think going back to what Eric said earlier about having, you know, displaying a pride flag in your home, or having a piece of a pamphlet on your desk or in your living room, taking maybe your child or whoever they are to a pride event. You know, just showing that you do support the community in general. They may not realize that you will be fully open to what they're going to tell you when they're ready.
Pride events are all we like.
As we navigate this, there are outside influences as well. What issues do you face in supporting your LGBTQ+ loved one? I think we've covered a few of them.
Maybe more.
Or there
Do
may be
you have
more.
any use case scenarios that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the outside influences are certainly the hardest part of raising a transgender daughter, and we didn't expect that going into it. But our family had to move from the community that my family has lived in for hundreds of years because our daughter was bullied there to a really extreme degree. So we had to move to a place where she would be safe, and a school district that would support her. And once we got there, we realized that the fight wasn't over. I mean, I've had to testify in the legislature against a bill last year that would have criminalized her health care. It would have removed her from our home and criminalized her parents and also her doctor. 2 years in a row, we've had to testify against bills that would block her from playing sports with other girls. And families like mine, we just have to live with the fact we know that every year, every legislative session, every presidential election, we might have to move again. We might have to leave the state or we might have to leave the country because our child will not have rights. When my husband and I were looking at moving to get our daughter to a safe place, we thought we would go back to the city that we had lived in the West, where I had been to graduate school. And then we quickly realized that our daughter had no rights there. She could be kicked out of a restaurant. She could be denied housing. At that point, she could still be denied employment. And the last time I checked a couple of months ago, there were 14 states, only 14 in the country where our daughter has equal rights. So yeah, we just kind of live with an exit plan, and we know we're watching families like ours get out of Texas, get out of Florida, get out of Arkansas, because it has been made unsafe for their children in the most basic sense of the word. So yeah, the outside influences have been, without a doubt, and continue to be the hardest part.
I'd agree with Abby. My family feels the same as far as getting ready to pack up and go somewhere safe. They're trying to take away their health care, their schooling, their whatever they deserve. These are children, these are people that belong in this community. And yeah, there's just so much bad propaganda out there too. I don't think my granddaughter watches much news anymore. It's just too bad. It's media has really made a mess of it.
One of the things when I hear Abby and Donna share this is it makes it sound awful to come to terms with the fact that you might have a trans loved one. Like, what's the world, what's it going to be like for them? The world sounds like a dangerous, awful place for them. Maybe it isn't a bad idea to try to prevent them from being trans, because and that's what my parents wanted. They did not want me to be anything other than a straight white boy, because they felt that that the world would be more accepting of me. But that's a really terrible logic, unfortunately, because yeah, it may very well be hard for your trans loved one in their life. That's something that, as a parent or a grandparent, you have to contend with. You have to wrap your head around and recognize that's a reality, because the alternative is far worse. The outcomes for trans people who have to stay in the closet, who can embrace their identity and live as their true selves, is horrible. So in one way, it almost looks like there's no good choice. But the work that we're doing and what we're striving for and why we're talking to you is because we believe it can be better. We know historically that there's been a lot of progress made in a lot of marginalized communities. We have a long way to go, but it's worth the struggle. We really need to fight to create a safe, sane, welcoming, loving place for everybody. And so, I would ask of any of you to brace yourself for that, because it is by far the best way forward. And it's unfortunate that we have to do that. But I am very heartened by my experience working with PFLAG and my exposure to so many different communities and their attitudes of willing to listen and to accept, and as they understand better what's going on and see that actually being trans is just one little thing. I always point out when I talk about my story is I am not defined by being trans. I'm a mother, a grandmother, I'm a child, I'm a spouse. I work, I'm a landlord. You know, I speak 3 languages. I'm a competent cook.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actually quite a competent electrician and a plumber. And, you know, there's all these aspects of me that define who I am. All I ask for as a trans person is to be acknowledged as a whole, complete human being, and to recognize that being trans is the only reason it's a big deal is because society is making it a big deal. It's not a big deal to me. I look forward to the day, hopefully in my lifetime, and I pray for it in a lifetime, of Abby's child, and Donna's child, and maybe the next generation. It is a non-issue. It's no different being trans than it is being a cis, white, educated, financially secure man, because they got it all. You know, and they take it for granted. I'd like to take my life for granted. Sure.
Thank you. So I'd like to shift a little bit because the journey for someone in this community is not always easy. And sharing these experiences is very impactful. I'd love to now ask, you know, what is your happiest or funniest memory from the journey that you and your loved ones have been on?
I guess I'll start. Well, the happiest is just watching my granddaughter just grow up and be happy, and she's thriving, and she has a loving family. So seeing her happy makes us happy. So yeah, that's about it.
I think, I mean, I'm so glad that Erica followed up that hard stuff with more, because I mean, I've learned, my husband and I both have learned so much from our daughter and the people we've met in our journey to support her, and we're infinitely more compassionate, less judgmental, and more aware human beings. And I just wish for the world to have more people like her, these just resolute beings who just, you know, just to be a child and risk everything you have to just tell adults over and over again, you've got it wrong. I know myself. It's just really powerful. But I think if I have to think of like one moment, I think it would actually be the moment when a doctor first said the word transgender to our daughter. We'd taken her to a specialist before she'd socially transitioned to talk about her struggles with gender, learn about how to support her. And the doctor asked her various questions, drew some pictures, and asked her to point to which picture represented her. And our daughter pointed, and the doctor said, just very simply and in just a really happy tone, great, the word for that is transgender. And it was like a light came on in our child. She had been a sad and very angry child for a long time. And truly, it was like a light came on. Everyone in the room could see it, and she transformed. It was like you could see joy in her that had never been there before. And of course, she's had struggles, whatever, she's just a kid since then, but she's a joyful person. And I'll never forget that moment when just that joy and just the lightness in her being that had never been there before. So, yeah.
I love listening to Abby and Donna because every time they speak, I get something out of it. And I actually haven't had an opportunity to do this with them, especially in the last couple of years. But again, I pulled something out of this that I think is so important, which is when people talk about, you know, again, not having the audience directly here to see people's nodding their heads or anything like that to get sort of like that body language feedback. It wouldn't surprise me, you know, if a lot of people come at this with a perspective when they're thinking about a trans loved one, you know, we've got a problem. You know, how do we fix this? You know, how do we make this, how do we have a good outcome? You know, safe, happy, secure, all that. I would put to you though, that the healthier outlook on this is an opportunity to enrich our lives. How can I enrich my life in this exposure to my beautiful child or grandchild and their journey and who they want to be and where they're going with it? To me, it's a beautiful and healthy way to look at it. And I have a feeling that will redound on your loved ones. So just thought, you know, that's what I heard from the two of you. If I were to answer this question, we'd need to go to a bar for 2 hours for me to get it all out there. So I'm going to narrow it down to a couple, or at least one. I thought it was an amusing experience. So when I was coming out to my family, and when I was coming out in general, by the way, one of the things that people ask and wasn't asked today is, why did they tell so-and-so before they told me? I'm the mother. They tell my sister or whoever. And it's really important to understand that oftentimes that happens because the last person a trans being, child or person wants to tell is the people closest to them, simply by virtue of the fact that there is so much at stake emotionally. Because if they're rejected by their mother, their father, their brother, their wife, their children, it's a tremendous loss. The first people I came out to were strangers. You know, I started, you know, and just like I started expressing myself as a woman and hiding to strangers, just to see, just to put it on, so to speak. And I was like, oh, this is working. And I started doing, if you ever watch Meet the Parents, I had that inner circle. Well, it took me a long time to work my way to that inner circle of trust. So I just worked my way in and told people who were a little bit closer. I kept getting positive reinforcement. Finally, I had to tell my family. And one of those that I had to tell was my son, who's an adult. He's now 27. And this was about 2016, so 6 years ago. He was just in his 20s. And he had been living with us for a while before I told him, and he moved out, but his girlfriend was living with us too. And I had discovered there's a girlfriend who was not part of the inner circle of trust, so I wasn't too worried if things didn't work out. But I discovered that she was very much of an ally. So I told her at one point, and I even presented myself to her before even telling my family. I was like, in my own house, I was just like, being very dodgy. And so she knew, and she was very supportive, and I swore her to secrecy, could you ever tell Keith? Oh, I'm stupid. So a year later, I find, you know, my wife, when I had only come out to her shortly before that, she's okay, well, you know, we really need to talk to kids. Kids need to know, we can't carry the secret. So you're right. Yeah, you're right. And so I invited my son, I called him up and said, hey, can you meet us at this restaurant in Concord? And he said, for dinner, and he said, sure. And he said, oh, try not to be late. And that tipped him off. I just assumed you would think that we're going to have the college talk again, which was always a stressful thing. So we showed up at the restaurant, we showed up there, and you know, said hi. Then he moved on to his girlfriend, but I said to him, so do you know why we asked you here? And he said, oh, so you tell me that you were trans? And I'm like, what? How did you know? And he said, oh, and Nicole told me a year ago. And I'm like, a year ago? That vixen. And then, and I'm mortified because he's been carrying this for a year, and I've carried this lie to him for a year. And he said, so are you okay with that? He said, well, of course I am. I figured you just tell me when you were ready. And I was, at that point, I was on the verge of tears because it was like the thing to tell me, to let me know everything was okay. And in fact, he and I went off after it on our own and for ice cream for dessert, just him and I at that point, and he started telling me some stuff about him that was like, whoa, really? I'm not going to betray his trust, but he confided in me certain things that to really reach out to me and let me know, you know what, you got a strong ally here, I get you. And my children have been, my daughter described it, we got to form a wolf pack. You know, we're gonna protect you and support you, and fortunately, they didn't really need to do that because I'm not I have too many issues. And so that was kind of an interesting experience, fun experience.
Great.
One other thing that I'd like to say is the panel, of course, as you probably all know, we have transgender children, grandchildren, and Erica obviously just told her story. But this support and love and everything we've talked about also goes to all the people inside of that circle, the lesbians, the gays, the non-binary people, and everybody else that fits into that category that Eric was talking about. It's not just the trans community, but everyone.
Yeah, we're getting all the spotlight now. Part of it is because trans people tend to, sometimes they are more noticeable. You know, there are many people in the community, especially if you're non-binary or you're not, like I identify as a female and I kind of make it pretty obvious with my expression, but there are many whose expression is not clear. And so, you know, people don't have to turn on the radar to key in on that, and that can elicit what I call noise. So wherever you go to a store or any establishment, you go to work, as a trans person, I feel this, but less so than most. You can feel the noise. You can see the look. You can feel a certain adjustment in body language and behavior. And sometimes it can be unpleasant. Sometimes it's just like, okay, it's there. And there's this constant, you know, for me, there's this constant noise in my life of being trans. For the most part, it's muted, but for some, it's very, very loud. And that's very difficult. So we're a long ways from getting to a point where people across that spectrum who tend to present more obviously in their expression, and there are many trans people who just, you know, they don't pass as far as the conditioned norms of society as to what it is to be male or female. And that's another big learning curve, and society's got to learn it because it's a problem of society, not of the trans community. So, yes.
Can I just follow up on what you said, is just defining the term or the idea of passing?
Mhm.
Because I think not everybody knows what that
Thank
is,
you. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So
That's a very valid.
if they appear visibly trans, you know they're trans. Or if somebody passes, meaning that you wouldn't be able to decipher them from a cisgender person. And many people today, trans children today who are growing up accessing puberty blockers and eventually hormones, they are indecipherable from their peers. So you would not ever know unless they told you. And then other people are just, I guess, not passing is what you said. I don't.
It's hard when there's a very important distinction, I guess, there's that pre-puberty, if a child gets to, and this can be a whole discussion unto itself, and I don't think I'll leave it to Ashley and to Mary, if this is an area they want to go into, but once you go through puberty and the secondary sex characteristics start to take place, you know, facial hair, bone structure changes, the hips widen on women, breast development, body hair, deepening voice. Those can be very hard to, it can be very hard to express yourself in the identity you feel you are when you have all these additional characteristics that are there, especially bone structure and voice. I'd like to say that, on the line of passing, I'd like to say that I have bathroom passing privileges, but not restaurant passing privileges. And by that, I mean, I travel all over the world and I have no fear going into a bathroom because nobody can tell. But when I go in a restaurant and I start to place an order, boom, 90% of the time or 80% of the time, I'm out because my voice gives me away. So that's an issue. And for younger, the youth, who don't have to worry about their voice speaking, it's a major advantage. So a lot of people want to, they're really concerned about hormone treatment, and the protocols around that are actually very, very strict. And they are actually backed by good science, and the science keeps saying, no, we're being too strict still. But the idea of trying to contain that expression, the harm that it can result in when I know a child who was insisting from early on that they were trans, and their parents said, well, when you're 18, then you can start to do things. And by then, a lot of the secondary sex characters had settled in, and the road is harder, much harder. And by the way, just I also want to say one other thing about passing. That's not really necessarily an important thing for a trans person. It's more important for society. Society seems to be more comfortable with people who pass, and it's very, very hurtful to those who don't. So sometimes I have a disadvantage to you pass really well, and I think that makes it easier for people to listen to me. And I think that's a shame.
And people make all kinds of choices. My daughter's young. I don't know what kind of choices she'll make.
So we'd love to now take any questions that might have come from the audience. Linda is monitoring the question and answer section. So if there's anyone in the audience who has a question, the question and answer section would be the right place to put it. I did see a question in the chat as well. And I think it relates back to what you were talking about, Abby, with the sort of legislature and different places where you've had to speak. There are a lot of statements, especially politically, in ads about, false information about adults pushing children towards change. And this guest would love to know what's being done to change those narratives. Any of you have any information, or if not, we can look to get more information.
If I understand the question correctly, like, what are people doing to push back against? I think a lot of LGBTQ rights groups are trying to do a lot of education. I don't know, books, articles, people are starting to talk more politically about people's rights. There's the Equality Act that if that were to pass, these things wouldn't have such power. I don't know, can anybody else?
I think just showing up. I've been to a few legislative sessions myself, and I was horrified. I was horrified by what these people were saying about our children and our grandchildren and our society, LGBTQ society. But show up, get involved, go to and support stores in your community that are LGBTQ friendly. Go to the bookstore and buy books. They're trying to take all the books off the bookshelf. Just go and buy books. write to your senators, your congressmen, just get out and be visible and show your support.
And
Um,
school boards.
And school boards, right. And just make sure you get out and vote. Get out and vote.
Those are all very great points. There's a lot of different ways that you can help as individuals. And there's a lot of work being done by national organizations. PFLAG National is a very, very powerful organization. And there are others. I actually, when I do my individual talk, one of the things I lead up to is, so what can y'all do to help? And I'll also talk about what we can do for ourselves. And one of the most important things is to be visible. We need to, we cannot stay. That's what my poem is about. We need those of us who are able stand up, be seen and recognized and validated in its work. And it can be risky, but I am very visible. And I do that. I use my voice to get the message out, to educate people, do outreach. That's why we're here. When it comes to, if we're referring to things like either political movements or the use of media to create what I would call distortion, the way to combat that is to stand up, speak out, get involved, vote and give money. Give money to organizations that are fighting it. Give money to candidates that stand for it if this isn't something that matters to you. Those of you have that capacity. That's how you can help. Also welcome people into your communities. If you're in a position to give somebody a job opportunity, keep that in mind. And really, really, really embrace everybody in the trans community, just as you would any marginalized community, whether they pass, whether they don't pass, or whether they're incredibly flamboyant. They all have a right to exist and to everything else that everybody in this country has. So give money, get active, and stand. Now, visibility for me is one thing. It's me being out there, but if your grandchild, your child wants to go to Pride, go with your child. Support them. Show it. If you're comfortable putting out a Pride flag or a trans flag, put it out. I know that not everybody can do this. Not everybody feels safe doing it. I get that. You do what you can. And just do not shrink, if you can, in the face of obvious bigotry. Stand with us and let us know that we're loved, because we need it.
I think that's a great place to close. What do you think?
I have two things I can throw out there real quick.
You
Questions for
have-
the audience.
Great.
These came up recently, real life experiences. Somebody I know, a family member of a trans child, took old photos of the child before they transitioned, posted them on Facebook. No clue that their trans child was very upset. Their trans child didn't say anything, just absorbed it. That's the thing to pay attention to, the past and the present. And some children may not care, but for some it could be something that really hurts them. So keep in mind things like that boundary between past and present, how to acknowledge it. How do you refer to them in the past? Because it was very interesting to hear Donna and Abby speak earlier. When Abby was speaking about her child, it was always the pronoun that her child identifies with today. Donna had a cutover. And I'm quite certain that Donna's respecting the boundaries of her child as well as Abby. But this is something to pay attention to, you know, like what is your child comfortable with? You know, what are ways, because you can really mortify a child, especially if the child is completely out and passing and our community doesn't even know, or they don't know that he or she is transitioned. Boy, talk about outing them in a different way, or outing them from their past. A couple things just to keep in mind as you're navigating this material.
Thank you. Any other closing thoughts that you guys like before we wrap up? Thank you.
I want to thank you, Erica, Donna, and Abby for joining us this evening. This has really been a great discussion and very enlightening. And letting us know how we can be allies and we can help the family members in the LGBTQ+ community. I want to thank our audience for joining us for today's panel discussion. And I hope that you did enjoy hearing from our guests and that the information that they shared will be of value to you. And we will be sharing some links that provide additional education and resources for community members in the chat and in post-event emails. So please watch for these.
I would also encourage all of you to visit AARP's website and PFLAG's website. You don't have to be a member to access it. I just put links in the chat. You can check there for upcoming events coming soon. And if you're interested in becoming an AARP New Hampshire volunteer, you can feel free to email us at newhampshireaarp@aarp.org. Be well and take care.
And become members of PFLAG too.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.